The Commission is grateful to the government of Uganda for providing the financial support to organize this dialogue and for the strategic direction and myriad of interventions aimed at enhancing the respect for human rights of vulnerable persons in Uganda. Before I end, I wish to thank UBC for hosting this dialogue. I also commend you for your objectivity, professionalism, and adherence to ethics of journalism and communication. I have been hosted at media houses where I have been treated as a suspect, where biased opinions of the moderators have been imposed on me, where I have been lectured and generally treated with disrespect. That UBC treats your guests with respect and allows them to communicate their message to the public cannot be taken for granted. The Uganda Human Rights Commission remains committed to addressing the challenges facing observance, human rights of vulnerable people in Uganda. I look forward to receiving recommendations from this dialogue aimed at enhancing the respect of human rights for vulnerable people. I wish you a fruitful dialogue, which I declare open for God and my country.
Well, thank you so much, Madam Wagadia Mariam, for that opening remark, and definitely also you did bring to light what our discussion will entirely entail. We must say that human rights are an umbrella for all of us to appreciate, as she did note, and majorly also for the vulnerable people it should be in addition. Our country, we must remember, does appreciate a number of human rights, let alone which are universal, particularly under a full chapter of the Constitution. And that will be the gist of our discussion, and it will give us direction and backbone. Now, away from the introduction remarks from Madam Wagadia Mariam, who's also the chairperson of Uganda Human Rights Commission. Now, this is the proper watchdog for human rights in the country, where matters have been handled, many of them still being handled. We also learned that a couple of months tribunals were sitting and all that, which later on, of course, we'll be getting into. But in studio with me, also other panelists who will be discussing still about the same topic of how do we enhance this whole thing of human rights in relation to vulnerable people. Now, starting from my extreme left, one gentleman from the Human Rights Commission, that is Mr. Bionabye Kamadi. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, and a good morning to our viewers.
You're welcome to UBC.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Is it your first time or your...
No, it's not my first time. Okay. I've been here before.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
And next to Mr. Kamadi is Madam Emily Kemigisha, who is also the country representative for Help Age International. Good morning and you're welcome, Madam.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, our viewers. It's a pleasure being here today.
Welcome to UBC.
Thank you so much.
And just next to me is also Madam Olive Namutebi, Executive Director, Albinism Umbrella, Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, moderator. Glad to be at UBC today.
Well, of course, with these, my panelists will be touching our first half of discussion towards how do we deal with this thing they call human rights. And there's another thing called being vulnerable, people call it disabled, others give it very many words. Society also has its own description of all the people we will be talking about. But starting from my far, I'll engage Mr. Kamadi to just give us a picture of what is this institution people call the Uganda Human Rights Commission. What is it? Is it a statutory body? What is its role, and why engage in this particular dialogue today?
Thank you very much. The Uganda Human Rights Commission, like you have rightly stated, is a constitutional body mandated to protect and promote human rights in Uganda. It was established against the backdrop of human rights violations in Uganda, and charged with the responsibility to ensure that human rights are protected and mandated, protected and promoted. And it is established under Article 51 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. its functions are spelled out under Article 52 of the Constitution, but majorly it is mandated to receive and investigate complaints of human rights violations, monitor the state of human rights in Uganda, and also conduct human rights education, awareness, then compile a report on the state of human rights in Uganda to Parliament every year, but it is also mandated to prepare and also publish periodic reports. So in so doing, our being here today is largely to create awareness in line with that constitutional mandate and Article 52. But the awareness we create is about people knowing their rights, demanding for them, how they should claim for their rights, and also in case their rights are violated, to get redress. So our being here today is aimed at highlighting the plight of the vulnerable people in Uganda, get to know the achievements made, what are the challenges, and what should be the way forward. That's why you see this discussion is being supported by a number of actors. Help Age International, they deal with the rights of the elderly. We have Albinism Umbrella to speak from that angle. In her opening remarks, the chairperson of the commission talked about marginalized disability. She will be telling us more about the plight of the people living with albinism in Uganda. Then we have Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development that will be joining us in the next round of discussions. We have NUDIPU, National Union for Disabled Persons in Uganda. You know very well what it does. And then my colleague from the Uganda Human Rights Commission will also be here speaking more to the mandate of the commission and the interplay and interface with all actors. Okay. Yeah.
Having given us that background in relation to also giving frame to our discussion, where we shall majorly be talking about disability or vulnerability of a particular group of Ugandans. And that's where I want to start the discussion. And I'll give the same opportunity to you, Mr. Kamadi, before I come to the other panelists. There's a definition that is quite stretched lately, biologically, physically, mentally. This thing they call vulnerability. Who is vulnerable? And what qualifies someone to be vulnerable? What are the yardsticks we give? This could give us a good springboard for our discussion.
Thank you very much. Vulnerability is it can be looked at various levels. I wouldn't want to give an academic definition. I want to
real life.
Yes, real life experience. It is a state of being powerless, a state of being weak, a state of being voiceless by virtue of what you are or the situation you find yourself in. Vulnerability is not homogeneous, you know. Like the chairperson mentioned at the beginning, you might be not vulnerable today, and tomorrow you find yourself in a category of vulnerable people. Yeah. Therefore, when we talk about vulnerability, we are looking at people who are in a situation who beyond their control cannot easily fend for themselves, and therefore they are powerless, they are voiceless, they are marginalized, therefore they need special attention. And that's why government comes up with the affirmative action in respect of bringing on board certain categories. It might be good to highlight the categories of vulnerability we consider. For instance, children, they are considered to be a vulnerable category of people because, you know, children are voiceless. They don't decide on their own. The other day I was reading about a child in a certain nursing school. You know, children, we are talking about 18 years and below. So even at 16, 17, one who is a child in Uganda here, the parent had gone to check on her daughter, only to find that the daughter had been removed from the school 2 months ago and was somewhere in Nansana, in somebody's home. Actually, this was a message by the police spokesperson at the beginning of this week. That is the kind of vulnerability we are talking about. Somebody who cannot decide on his or her own and therefore needs attention and special help. Okay. So we have children. We have people living with disabilities. Yes. On account of physical disability, mental disability, and other forms of disability. The situation they find themselves in is a little bit different from those who don't have disabilities. As we shall be discussing later, those of us who may not be having disabilities, sometimes we don't think about those people living with disabilities. For instance, there is an outcry in the country at certain service centers. For instance, hospitals, health centers, courts of law, and other government offices when it comes to accessing those premises. Okay, I don't know if UBC you are any better here, but that is an issue we shall discuss. Okay. Yeah.
Having given us a picture of what disability, what qualifies to be disability, and definitely also vulnerable, I want to come to Madam Emily Kemigisha. Is age a disability, or is someone vulnerable when they are old? Good question. Should we be worried of aging? Yes. Probably.
Thank you so much, moderator. I want to say that aging or age is a process, really. Mm-hmm. And this is a category of vulnerability, like my colleague was saying, that we cannot actually run away from. If you're lucky. Okay. We all want to live longer, but we are always...
Age was a blessing.
Yes.
The books.
We should be looking at age as a blessing. Yes. But not really getting afraid of age. And no wonder people keep hiding their age because of the situation, because of the vulnerability that age puts you into, especially in Africa and specifically in Uganda. When you get older, you're looked at as more of a liability, which shouldn't be the case. Maybe for the interest of our viewers, I want to say that the definition of an older person in Uganda and in many countries is someone who is aged 60 and above. So when you have clocked 60 and above, you are categorized as an older person. And if we all look back in our families, in our communities, we have these people. And there is always a situation that comes in. For example, when you talk about health, as we age, our immunity system gets weaker. It is more like the tear and wear method, or what can I say? It is a tear and wear approach, I should call it, so to speak. As you get older, you get weaker. Your body is no longer able to fight the diseases, is no longer able to fight and resist all the diseases that you used to fight, for example. So you will notice that at 60, people begin to fall sick more often.
The level of exposure to any liability increases.
We have so many people with a high blood pressure. We have many older persons that are battling with cancer. We'll have a very high percentage of older persons that are diabetic, okay? And we know what our health system is like in Uganda, okay? So that already puts you at a risk and in a vulnerable situation.
Yes.
But also remember that as you get older, your opportunities of earning diminish.
Absolutely.
In most cases, when you clock 60, you're forced to retire if you've been in formal employment. Okay. But even those in the informal sector, you're not as strong enough to to do the farming, for example, we know that a majority of us,
advantage has definitely
yes,
reduced.
yes, you're not able to dig a bigger chunk of land that you used to do when you are actually younger. Okay, so that makes you even more vulnerable to financial stamina, so to speak.
Sure.
You do not have a job. You are not able to do as much, to run around, and get yourself some income. But also, the responsibilities at that time also increase. You'll find that in most cases, the older persons are the ones looking after many other categories of vulnerable people. In a normal setting of an older person's headed household, you're going to find a child, a vulnerable child. In most cases, the orphans. As a matter of fact, 63% of the orphans and vulnerable children in Uganda
Live with their old.
are under the care of older persons. In most cases, grandparents.
What's the cause of that, Madam Kenmugisha? What would be the cause
I
of that?
think the cause of this is really...
The statistics are quite worrying.
yes, they are worrying.
What could be the cause?
One is the fact that the orphans, okay, for some time it is the whole issue of HIV and AIDS, Most of the parents, when they die, then the children are left to the grandparents. That is one. But also there's another issue that is coming up. I would call it irresponsible adults. We come to Kampala, play your games, somehow we have a child. When there's a misunderstanding with the family or the couple, then you take the child home. And that wouldn't be a very big problem because, yes, as older persons, you have very big responsibilities and roles, and they actually enjoy supporting the vulnerable orphans. But the problem is that support that comes. You send a child home, but you have not sent any support. Remember, the older person is not working. The older person doesn't have enough energy to dig. So that means the dependency burden is becoming so high. And as a matter of fact, when you interact with older persons, the biggest challenge, their burden, the biggest fear factor is the vulnerable children they're taking care of.
Okay.
Even when you talk about the social pension, the little money they get, the big percentage of it goes to scholastic materials, goes to medical bills for children.
Of these young ones.
Of the young children.
Because they can't take care of themselves,
yes.
But now you're putting more
yes.
burden.
Already they are struggling themselves, and then you've added another burden of the children.
So today, as we discuss relating to the rights of vulnerable persons, these situations we are trying to put to light today in this dialogue is to also create awareness to our viewers, to the country entirely, so that we know how to deal with these challenges when they manifest before our eyes. We also will remind you that some of these things that are discussed here are not in the vacuum. These are the realities of where we live. When our colleagues here talk about things like throwing kids, actually some people just dump these children to the villages and they never know, as he said.
Absolutely.
And now I want to come to Madame Namuteri here. Albinism. The realities that are faced with the people, and I don't want to say suffer, because I don't know if it is probably until you give us more light about it. Maybe shed some light. What is albinism?
Thank you so much, moderator, and you began it well. There is a lot of misconception on the issue of albinism, and I'll attempt to define it. Yes, it is a rare condition that we all know. It is genetic. So you have to get it from both parents. Both must be carriers of this gene, of the albinism gene. It's unfortunate when I start to listen in the issues of older persons and how they are dumped at the grandparents. For us, it's your own parents who dump you because you look different. Yes. And so I actually want to appreciate the government of Uganda when they passed the Person with Disability Act 2020, yes. They included albinism.
Okay.
And again, like you put it at the beginning, vulnerability, disability seem to be, hyped. The language also keeps changing.
Oh, yes.
Today we are not saying persons living with disabilities. You know, it's like you live with somebody in the house. No. A person will recognize the human right of this person, then with whatever condition it is.
carry, yes.
So it is persons with albinism, persons with disabilities. So of course the language keeps changing. But that brings that dignity, the human dignity of this person. So looking at the constituency that I represent, many of us have been raised by single parents. If you are lucky, or precisely grandparents, aunties, and I appreciate the fathers who have been in the lives of persons with albinism, but majority of them, including my own, rest in peace, that for them they felt, since I didn't carry this child, no one can tell. DNA is here today, but some of us in the days, I don't know even how many Ugandans average they can access the services of DNA. So quite often, the fathers take off and they deny responsibility of having fathered children with albinism. So this condition comes with two major health challenges. Because I lack the black pigment that protects any other Ugandan from the sun, my skin is very delicate and it is grossly affected by the sun exposure. The sun has UV rays, which are highest between midday and 3 p.m. And when we are really exposed to those very high UV rays, our skins burn and they get bruises. When this is not treated, it results in skin cancer. And it is very unfortunate that 80% of persons with albinism succumb to skin cancer, which is very preventable, very preventable. If we had we would maybe dress like what Muslims are today, like everything, head to toe, and just
reduce on the direct effect
exactly, to reduce on the exposure. But quite often, many of us or many of our parents didn't even know what to do. I should use my example. Of course, as a mother, I was raised by my mom, needless to say. She would know, or she would someone joked in some of the promises that if you were to bring wealth, what a contradiction, because many of you are very poor. You understand?
Sadly.
Sadly, many of us are so poor.
Well, when you talked about bringing wealth, my mind went to marriage. So the next thing I was going to recommend people to look for.
Persons with albinism. Incidentally, no. And there is also another very sad myth about being a woman has its vulnerability.
Oh, yes.
Having albinism has its vulnerability. Now, there is a sad myth that when you have carnal knowledge of a person with albinism or you marry them, then you get cured of HIV/AIDS. I used to think Ugandans now know about HIV/AIDS. Fortunately, majority do, but this is a very sad story. And some of our people, because they are economically very vulnerable,
Yes.
they have been given money to test out this myth, because they do not have this knowledge. So awareness is key, information is key. Please know the truth and share it. Persons with albinism are normal. It's the other anatomy and everything is the same as you. The difference is skin color. Skin color, and does not in any way negate any other ability that a person with albinism does. Just protect me from the sun. My sight is bad. Even when I have these contact lenses,
You struggle to
I
collect
still
a
struggle
good view.
because it cannot be rectified. Even if I had so many surgeries, science hasn't come to say that involuntary movement that causes me not to see clearly or far can be corrected.
Okay.
So that cannot be corrected. And whoever has a child with albinism and viewing today, we are partners with Mengo Hospital, the biggest eye department we have in the country. Please go for an annual checkup. Awesome. In this work, I have been here for, I think in the disability movement for around 15 years. I used to think that when we are young, the sight is fairly good. Until we went with Mengo in one of the field visits. There were 3-year-olds who were close to blindness.
Oh dear.
Because they have albinism, and it varies. I may be able to see 2 meters, another may see 5, just like every other person has a different ability.
Challenge.
So albinism goes too much into, please create awareness as a parent. I don't know how many couples test for albinism before they get married.
It's important?
It is. It would be important to know that the Sarah, Evelyn, whoever you're going to marry, perhaps there is a 25% chance for you to have a child with albinism. Please check in your generation, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations back.
Wow.
Are you sure there isn't any gene? Because it is a recessive gene. Recessive meaning it can take 2 generations to come.
And it reoccurs.
And it reoccurs. In my case, my mom tried 3 generations and there was none.
Wow.
Today, I know they have albinism. So both ends, my mother's side, my father's side, they are people with albinism. But I was a shock to them.
Well, clearly, digging into this whole discussion about we're trying to relate human rights and this vulnerability, and clearly now what we did hear from Madam Namutebi does directly speak into what Mr. Kamadi said in his opening remarks when he also told us about this could manifest in different ways as long as someone is not able to participate generally or naturally in activities like Madam Namutebi has just also broken it down to tell us more about issues of the skin complexion and sight. I want to go back to Ndugu Kamadi. Human Rights Commission has a greater mandate that is constitutional, as you did say. And what is the meeting point of the Commission in rectifying the challenges that Madam Emily gave us here in relation to the vulnerable people, the exposure they get when they grow, and now also having listened to Ms. Namutebi here, giving us a greater appreciation of albinism and the challenges they face. What is the meeting point? What is the greater role of the Commission in addressing some of the challenges people with vulnerable situations or disabilities face? I
should start with the UBC as a meeting point. We are at it here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are at it here. And on a serious note is about awareness.
Indeed.
I could see you nodding as she was submitting.
I was learning.
All of us are learning. So awareness is very, very important. But most importantly, the dignity of a person with albinism, the dignity of an elderly person who is 75 years, the dignity of a child, the dignity of a person with a disability. Because human rights is about human dignity.
Yes.
Now, going back to the meeting point, there are so many meeting points. In the protection and promotion of human rights, major attention is paid to the most vulnerable persons, the most disadvantaged, which resonates well with the Sustainable Development, the Agenda 2030 catchword, leaving no one behind.
Oh, yes.
It is important to look at the people who are disadvantaged in society, and when you are programming, policy making, any intervention, developmental and otherwise, you must pay special attention to this category of people. And at the Commission, we have a vulnerable persons unit.
Okay.
Yeah, that speaks to the issue you have raised. Yes, the mandate is broad, but the Commission deemed it necessary to have a special unit that is charged 24/7 with looking at the plight of the vulnerable persons in Uganda. In so doing, we have a number of interventions that looks at sensitization, like we are doing here in this dialogue, partly, but we also monitor the rights of the various vulnerable persons in Uganda, persons with albinism, rights of the elderly. Suspects are vulnerable persons in prisons. Refugees are vulnerable persons.
Oh, yes.
Women, some women, if you like, are vulnerable persons. And therefore
I saw Madam Emily laughing, and Ms. Namutebi, you may want to explain some in the sense of...
You know, I told you vulnerability at the beginning is about being voiceless, powerlessness, inability to fend for
Express
yourself.
Naturally.
Yes, but you know, Madam Namutebi here, she may not fall in that category. That's why I'm careful to say some women. And I said vulnerability is not homogeneous. But I also wanted to say vulnerability is beyond an individual. It could be a society as a whole. It could be an ethnic group. It could be a community that is susceptible to vulnerability. But going back to that meeting point, we also receive complaints of human rights violations. That is another meeting point of from persons with from vulnerable persons. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So we receive those complaints and process them accordingly in order to ensure that they have redress. But we also go ahead to review legislation that is coming up in Parliament to ensure that they are human rights based compliant in order to ensure that the rights of the vulnerable persons are taken care of. It's very, very important. Because in the planning process and budgeting, it is important to capture the needs of the vulnerable persons in order for them to receive the services they desire. Okay. So that is part of the meeting point. Yeah.
Okay. Now, having said that, and as we did also say in the beginning of this dialogue, electronic dialogue, that we are also, in as much as we want to highlight the challenges, give the true situation, we also want to forge a way forward. And that is how I want to come to Madam Kemingisha here. With the aged people, most recently we saw they have a vote in Parliament. I think they have a representative, they got someone to represent them. Gladly, most recently they have been getting a few remuneration. I don't know if it's remuneration or grants, or which you will throw light to. Kindly help us understand some of the interventions that have been put in place to assist this vulnerability that is carried by age. Are there some interventions, both government and private, that we see towards assisting this group of people?
Thank you so much, moderator. Yes, I want to start by commending the government of Uganda because they have taken really big strides in ensuring that the rights of older persons are really respected in the country. When I compare Uganda with other African countries, I think we have moved a step. We are better than many people, although there are also many other countries that are far much better than us. So there's still room for improvement, and we can still put our heads together. We can still support each other to ensure that the rights of older persons are protected. I know the person from the Ministry of Health would be in a better position to explain what the government has put in place. But like you rightly said, yes, we have now representation, and all these things have not really just come. No. They've come through advocacy, they've come through raising awareness like this, and for people to appreciate the fact that aging is a process and older persons are a category of people that we should be talking about. And like I had said before, this is where we are all candidates of older persons category, and we all want to get there. So we want to do our best as different stakeholders to make it a safe place, so that when we finally land, then it is a safer landing position for us. And it is important for us to know that the aging population is growing. And as a matter of fact, by 2050, we will have more older persons than the children we have today. And this is already indicated in other developed countries. You'll find that the demographic graph is different from what it is here now. Here, we have more of the youth and children and fewer older persons. But this is going to change because of the improving health systems and all these good things that are coming up. Now, this chunk of the youth that are between 0 to 35 years, in the next 20 years, 30 years, they are going to be older persons. So what are we going to do? We need to put systems in place so that we are not firefighting. You know, now in Uganda, we have this crisis of the youth. But now when they transit to older persons, is it when we are going to start panicking and planning as a country to address issues of older persons? Because there will be more. It is high time that we started now, and I know it is the sole responsibility of the government really to take care of the citizens. But as other stakeholders, we also have a role to play. As civil society organizations, we have also tried our best to ensure that we support our older persons. One, in raising awareness. Awareness is being raised at grassroots. And it is important that older persons also form social groups, so to speak, because then when they are in groups, they are able to get enough information. They are able also to address issues of isolation and loneliness. And by the way, that is a very, very key issue that comes with age, Now we are able to, catch up with each other. You can visit a friend when you want. You can take me out. I can take you out. But time is going to come at 75 when we are not able to do that. And also the friends will be fewer because, the death rates will be high. So, and in most cases, people want to say, okay, when we retire, we go to the village. But where is do you have social capital there? Do you have the friends there, the cliques there? So a lot of older persons are struggling with loneliness. And that kills them faster.
Related to that, before I come to Ms. Namutebi, there's a contradiction when it comes to assisting the aged in particular and how they're exposed to vulnerability. Should it be a government-led agreement, discussion, or a private-led discussion? Because many people have alluded to assertions like, you've given birth to children, you've created family, and then family throws you back. And this is, you've seen this in the Western world. Yes. For them, they just take you to homes.
Yes.
You've seen this kind of things. Now, at that point, there's a contradiction. What's government's role vis-a-vis the private role of family, society? Probably at this point, we also want to bring in the discussion aspects like religion, culture. Like, what's the role of various players in relation to age and how the exposure that comes with aging?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that is a very good question and a point of view that we should all be having as we create this awareness. Each stakeholder really has a role to play. An older person themselves has a role to play.
It starts with them.
It starts with them.
Okay.
It starts with us. I want actually to associate with myself with the older persons. Because, by the way, you need to notice that we are now older than when we came in.
Absolutely.
When we came into this studio, we were some minutes younger.
Hey.
We are now older. We are getting there.
Now you're threatening.
Yes, we need to get threatened. This is a good threat. Every other minute that passes, we are getting closer to older persons category.
Okay.
So we need to be aware and treat the older persons the way we would want to be treated
when we
get there. And we are surely getting there, and we are all praying to get there. So we have a responsibility. We will have a responsibility as older persons. One is to know the rights, but also to be able to claim them.
Oh, yes.
For example, I'll talk about the issue of land.
Mm-hmm.
Most older persons have land, but there's this tendency of the children wanting to grab the land and feeling like, okay, if my father has land, that is my land. That is not right.
People want to inherit even before they want.
Someone demises. Yes. I think viewers need to understand that,
yes,
once someone has land, whether they are old or not, whether you have children or not, as long as they are already above 18, that is your land, and you have the right to decide on how to use it. If you want to sell it and enjoy your life and meet your medical bills, let it be. But we have this challenge where adult children want to actually even kill the older man. An African problem? Like you die and then you share. Yes, it's getting to a cultural problem, and cultural institutions have to come in here and support
and address
to create awareness. Yeah. Someone has to live in dignity. I worked and toiled for this land. Yeah. Let me enjoy it in dignity. You're also an independent individual, and you need to also fend for yourself. That is one. But also the government has a big role to play in terms of policy frameworks and ensuring that we have the policy in place, the policy which is also implemented. In Uganda we're very good at formulating laws, but the implementation is the challenge. Okay, how do we ensure that older persons are protected? For example, when you are a parent and you don't take responsibility of your child, there is a law that catches with you. You're penalized for not being responsible enough to take care of the children. How come we do not have
the reverse of it?
A reversal of it.
The child not taking care of the
Two parents raise 10 children, but it's very ashamed that 10 children cannot take care of the two, and the law is silent about that. So I think as a government we you will need a law to be enacted to ensure that we have our older parents respected, because they invested a lot in us.
They do, indeed they do.
And it's not about, I know sometimes, we're also equally struggling, but you notice that people are giving support to other people, friends, and they've left their parents to suffer. And in most cases, you expect them to call you and say, okay, send me some money, and that depletes their dignity.
Absolutely.
No one wants to be begging for money all the time. And I want to challenge the listeners now. Many people will say, okay, so-and-so has rich sons, and then we assume that they have money. But how many of us periodically send money to our parents without being asked?
I don't think even it takes being rich. It takes understanding the need that age exposes to them.
Yes.
Okay, that is quite a lovely woman.
And add something small.
Please.
It's an interesting discussion, talking about the rights of the elderly, but she also raised an important point that we are a few minutes older than we came in here.
It was quite a scary.
Yeah,
it's real.
And it is even more worse because I was born on this day at 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
So, implying now I'm an elderly person.
You should
Happy birthday.
By a full year. But the point I wanted to make is before we become old, we are young. Yes. So the message to the youth in this country should be to work for that period, as opposed to waiting to become old and then you begin demanding from your children. And this I would like it to be understood very well. What did you do in your youthful stage, you as an individual? I have somebody who told me we are poor because of our parents. And I'm saying this generally. Because if you can see, if the family is wealthy, there is a likelihood that that wealth will be sustained. So everybody should be working for his children who are not yet born, for his grandchildren who are not yet born, so that the family name keeps moving. Yes, it is important if I'm elderly like me today to ask my children for help, but at some point, my children should also be able to find, they should manage something small I've put in place in order to help me with ABCD. So the cycle of poverty becomes vicious if we as in the youthful stage, we don't plan for our old age.
Okay.
That is what we call sustainable development. Plan for now and the future generation. It would be good for my grandchild to find a plot of land already available. Then my grandchild will also plan for his children and grandchildren.
Well, I like the fact that he brought that up in that angle. And some of us who read the Bible, there's somewhere in Ecclesiastes where they talk about enjoy your youthful time, live a good life, but do not forget that you're aging. And in Uganda, we have a saying, "Nzirugavu zezikolera enjeru." I think that resonates with what Ndogo Kamadi is saying. But coming to you, Ms. Namutebi, and as you try to wipe up this first section of discussion relating it to human rights and disability, we would want majorly in relation to albinism to understand what can be done to make the situation better. The Human Rights Commission is listening, the government is listening, Ugandans are listening. We all want to be part of the solution, okay? Because as you did say earlier, this is not a choice. Someone, you see, that's like unluckily, we never get to tick a score at me when I'm... So this, that we are faced with the challenge of albinism, what can be done? Before that, what has been done? Then we can also see what can be added to what's been done.
Thank you again, moderator. And indeed, what has been done is a good note to begin with. Absolutely. It's not all bad. We can lament from morning to evening, but like I said, first and foremost, we want to appreciate the People with Disability Act 2020 that included albinism. Yes. Tick. That box is awesome. Really a big tick. Awesome. And to the government. The other big milestone that we celebrate with my commissioner being here, Ministry of Gender, they spearheaded government domesticating an African plan of action for persons with albinism. Oh. So we are the third country in Africa to bring it home for persons with albinism. We've dubbed it the NAP, National Action Plan for persons with albinism. Okay. Now, this is like the constitution. And again, it took a lot of advocacy because, trust me, the ministry has all these other papers and documents. There is, of course, a policy document for people with disabilities. But that did not bring out albinism. So they listened to us, and now we have it. This NAP has everybody included. You have a role to play. Each one of us. We talked of refugees. Uganda, we know how many we host. Indeed. And interestingly, we have a very big number of refugees with albinism. Ramanja, Chaka, that side of the DRC. Went to the north. I think there the genes are not very concentrated from Sudan. Yeah, Bidi, they don't have any person with albinism. But down in the western, quite a number from DRC. The awareness we have done, and I will also speak from albinism umbrella side. Organizations are there. We are there. Some of you could have seen us up to Parliament, the 10th Parliament. We were glad to have been there for their fundraising works. They used to have an annual week where the person meets the Parliament. And albinism took the flag for the 4 years that they did it. That was awesome awareness. How I pray the 11th Parliament would also listen in and carry this flag forward. Two, having two big issues for me are fundamental. We have done some steps, working with the Ministry of Health, working with the Ministry of Education, because I am convinced that without education as a foundation, I know I will not be here for starters. So we know that education is very paramount for each child, so to speak, but most especially for those who are vulnerable. Children with albinism, like I said, have an issue with the vision. In our UPE schools, and I will talk as basic as that, because we are poor, but there is a government opportunity to go to UPE, yes. And we encourage our parents to do so. But these numbers are quite big. We are only asking you, that teacher, that DEO, special needs greetings from the Ministry of Education. We have had this debate that can we have these learners put to the front of the class so that they can see, because many drop out. I've had different people say, I'm guilty. I teased a child out of school. And these are 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. You want to touch, to pinch. Is your blood red? And we're only saying, can we create a safe environment for them to learn? You and me have a right to education. So because I'm different, I should not be denied this right. Secondly, the health system. We're not going to fix all the problems in the health sector. But we are saying, if this mother has come, as a woman, I have a right to give birth. I have because I'm looking at myself at birth, yes, I am here, I didn't choose. But now, I can also want to have a child. Yeah. You go to these health centers, the health workers don't want to touch you. You are different, they'll serve everybody else and then get you last, you know? Okay. You come in the hospital at 8 a.m. At 2 p.m. is when they think they will touch you and let you go, or there is no Panadol, whatever. And we are saying it is only simple that you give us that service, give us that same treatment. So there is a lot that we can do. You and me can change this life.
Okay. Clearly, there's a lot that needs to be desired. And when we have discussions like this, we try to bring to light some of the challenges, and later on the plight of people who live with various disabilities. I'll give a minute to all of us as we conclude, as we also will have another group of panelists coming to discuss the same discussion, probably from a different angle. Have colleagues from the Ministry of Gender, Nodipu. But just lastly, I'll start with Ndugu Kamad. In relation to Human Rights Commission, what are your last remarks relating to vulnerable persons?
One is to understand that we are all born equal in dignity and rights. And therefore, we should treat everybody with respect. We should not stigmatize anybody on account of vulnerability. Change. We have parents with children, for instance, with disabilities, with albinism, and all sorts of other impairments. I like the way she put it. Apart from the skin color, every other aspect is like you and me. Therefore, they should be accorded all the rights every other person appreciates. Therefore, that is very, very important. But also, from the perspective of the UHRC, is for us, we shall continue with the awareness, but we also call upon those who have listened to us and before to put in more effort in ensuring that the rights of the vulnerable persons are respected across the board. And those vulnerable people whose rights are being violated, they should come to the Commission for help, because we are there as one of the redress mechanisms in order to help them achieve and realize their rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Emily Kemugisha, your last remark relating to our elderly and probably also what should be done or what shouldn't be done.
Okay, thank you so much. First and foremost, and I'll repeat again, is to treat older persons the way we would want to be treated when we get old. Because we have different responsibilities at community level, at family level. Treat the older person in your family as the way you'd want to be treated. If you're a community leader, ensure that you enable older persons to access the services. If you're a health worker, please ensure that you change that attitude towards older persons, feeling that they're dirty, you don't want to touch them, you want them to wait longer, and yet they don't have the energy. Put yourself in the shoes. I think that is the simple message we can have. And for the government, let's ensure that we have policies implemented, not just enacted, but implemented. We have the AU Protocol on Rights of Older Persons. I request that we have this ratified to ensure that the rights of older persons in the country are upheld. And also for the civil society organizations, thank you so much for the good work we are doing. Let us continue to share the good practices and support also the government to ensure that these good practices we are doing, the services we are providing, can be replicated by other service providers.
Okay. Now, lastly, I'll have Ms. Olive Namutebi also to give us a remark closing in relation to plight of our sisters and brothers, mothers, and also children who have albinism. Maybe also a message of encouragement for them. Many of them have also lost self-esteem because of what's done to them. I can imagine someone pinching the other, trying to see if they have blood. How would this person come back? So as you close, speak a word to the people.
I want them to be. For fellow persons with albinism, believe in yourself. I believe this could be my mantra, that when I love myself, then there is some air about love that I emanate. But if you do self-neglect and you don't look down on yourself, not everything they tell you is true, and discern not to just weigh down yourself with all the negativity in the society where we live. I end by asking each of us, there is a national action plan, please support it. Albinism Umbrella has enough copies. In hard copy, we will send you. But one of the big things is creating awareness. So you have known the truth that albinism is not anything but a skin disorder, so to speak. It is only a skin condition. Know this truth and pass it on. And I will again say, especially the Ministry of Health, please put sunscreens on the essential drug list, because it's a long debate that we have had, advocacy. They provide ARVs to persons with HIV/AIDS. Yes. We're saying this is a condition that we have to live with. There is no medical remedy of changing my skin color. But the only mitigation I have, apart from putting on everything, like covering myself, is that screen that I put on my body so that I can be able to work like any other person. They're very expensive because they're for the white community. But we believe we can produce them here. We have so many scientists. But the government, to do this, the process is Ministry of Health needs to recognize it as a drug, to be put on that essential list so that the process is started. Finally, education. Let our DEOs inform their head teachers. We have lobbied to the fact that learners with albinism are given extra time. They are given large print for national exams. But the head teachers don't inform the UNEB.
The examiners.
So we are here, the Albinism Umbrella. This is a year where we're just starting. We have candidates get to us, or your head teachers should get to UNEB, that these learners are given an opportunity to excel, because I know they really do. Thank you.
Wow, I was opportunity to have a doctor who was had the same condition as growing up as a child. So I used to enjoy going to the doctor even when I wasn't sick. I would pretend because I used to love his complexion. So every time you were talking about, for me it was a different picture. So I think for me the message is for the people out there to appreciate people with their indifferences. It's as simple as that. So we'll get to a break, and of course we'll be going on with the same discussion, still looking at this whole thing of vulnerable. Who is a vulnerable person and the exposures they come to, but also where do they, what can be done in relating to us implementing or appreciating their rights, let alone human in that nature. We'll take a break and we'll be having another set of panelists having a deeper discussion in the same subject matter. Good morning.
Look out for the live broadcast of the e-dialogue on the rights of vulnerable persons on UBC TV this Thursday 30th March 2023 from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. In line with its mandate, UHRC has organized an e-dialogue that will be broadcast live on UBC TV and streamed through various social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The dialogue is a follow-up of issues that have emerged from time to time during stakeholder engagements regarding the plight of vulnerable persons and some of the challenges that they experience. It is to empower the masses, especially the different categories of vulnerable persons, to be able to speak out and demand for their rights and be able to effectively participate in decision-making processes at all levels. Don't miss to be part of this dialogue.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
Gatawo with MTN Momo Advance. Momo Advance tops up your Momo to complete your transactions. Dial star 165 star 5 star 3 hash to apply. MTN Momo Advance is always available when you need it.
UBC is the national public broadcaster. We educate, inform, entertain, and inspire our audiences. You can watch us on free-to-air channel 001, DSTV channel 282, GoTV channel 371, Star Times channel 201, Zuku TV channel 20, and Azam TV channel 350. Even when your subscription expires, you can still watch UBC for free on your pay TV platforms.
This week on UBC.
Why are we in the world? Basically, we are in the world because we need to view nature and wildlife.
They used to call them tortoise, but it's not tortoise.
We do carry out activities, the game drive, the safari walks, and the boat cruise.
Whenever we have any activity or a game drive, we normally have a sundowner. We go and set our table or our bar outside, then we enjoy the drink.
on with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
A weekly face-to-face conversation focusing on accountability, inspiration, information, and sensitization of the public from the various sources, such as inspirational profiles.
Having a disability is not inability.
Professional guidance.
There is no special antiretroviral therapy that is given specifically for discordant couples.
And of course, politics.
Don't you see anywhere that you would give a credit in the fight against COVID?
My role as the owner of the country is not to, be preoccupied by giving credit to my servant.
We have said that if we are to talk to General Museveni, there must be certain conditions in place.
Is it true that you paid 5 million shillings to MPs that voted for Anita Monga and Tayebo?
That is laughable. Why would we pay when we have nominated them as SEC?
Every party has been represented in Uganda's parliament for 10 years. We only by one MP, you yourself and my daughter, Susan.
Every Friday 9 p.m., it's one-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa on UBC TV, inspiring Uganda.
Look out for the live broadcast of the e-dialogue on the rights of vulnerable persons on UBC TV this Thursday 30th March 2023 from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. In line with its mandate, UHRC has organized an e-dialogue that will be broadcast live on UBC TV and streamed through various social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The dialogue is a follow-up of issues that have emerged from time to time during stakeholder engagements regarding the plight of vulnerable persons and some of the challenges that they experience. It is to empower the masses, especially the different categories of vulnerable persons, to be able to speak out and demand for their rights and be able to effectively participate in decision-making processes at all levels. Don't miss to be part of this dialogue.
BC, but also being interested and also commenting on this discussion we're having today. Now, also to remind our viewers out there, for those who have just joined us, we are discussing matters of human rights and vulnerable persons in Uganda. You may also call them disabled persons. Now, earlier on, we did have a discussion into the aged people or persons. We also had a discussion into people who struggle with albinism, but also an angle from the Human Rights Commission of Uganda. But also still relating to the same discussion, we will have to shift gears with a new team of panelists who will also be adding volumes onto the same discussion. And I will also first have to introduce my guests as panelists again. That is from the extreme left, Mr. Odra Dennis, who's also manager policy and rights in Nudipu. Good morning, sir. You're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
How is Nudipu?
Nudipu is good.
I used to use the calendar for covering my books. At least I remember Nudipo very well as a young man. So when I heard the word Nudipo, that came in my mind. I remember we used to get old calendars. Mm-hmm. So at least I'm familiar.
Not only calendars, but many things.
Okay, how is the institution there?
Thank you. Nudipo is well.
Okay.
And also thanks to the viewers who are really viewing our dialogue meetings.
Okay. And, welcome to this dialogue,
panelists.
At least. But also, just next to Mr. Dennis there, we have Madame Ajambo Emily, the Assistant Commissioner, Disability and Elderly. Good morning, Madam.
Good morning. Good morning, our viewers.
Welcome to UBC.
Thank you.
You're welcome also to this dialogue. You have a lot of questions and things to answer when it comes to our judges.
Yeah, it's good opportunity for us to tell them and address them on what is supposed to be addressed.
Okay. And lastly, we have Miss Ruth Sechindi, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yes, also who she is the Director Monitoring and Inspections, Uganda Human Rights Commission. You're welcome, Madam.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
It's good to have you.
Thank you for having us.
And I'll start with you here before I go to the other colleagues. You're the people in the field, I'm assuming, the people who try to understand what is being done, if there are projects, maybe how they are being done. What basically goes on I'm assuming you're the people who would be the right people to tell us the true challenges that are faced with people with disabilities. And we can look at the various disabilities. One of your colleagues, Mr. Kamadi, gave quite a broad appreciation of the disabilities of persons who are vulnerable. But when you come to Uganda today, it starts with the wording. When you find someone with a mental disability, call them Abalalu. You find someone Omulema Atesobola, or you can imagine someone called Ateso. What is the reality in the field as you do this monitoring and the inspections? What is the reality that faces people with disabilities or who are vulnerable in the field out there?
Thank you. The Uganda Human Rights Commission has the mandate of monitoring the human rights situation in Uganda. And we also inspect places of detention and other things. But when it comes to disability and vulnerability, there are different categories of disability, and like my colleague previously indicated, we have intellectual disability, the learning disability, the visual disability. So there are different disabilities, whether it's people with Down syndrome, autistic people, persons with physical disability, whether, in many cases, people look at the physical disability, but disability is a spectrum, and it's not homogeneous. So because of that, we look at many aspects, and I'll also indicate the findings as you have requested. When it comes to older persons, we have found that many older persons, Uganda's life expectancy in the 1980s was 40. By 2020, I think that is the last statistic, it was 62.4. That means the life expectancy, every Ugandan is expected to get to the age of 62 plus, in there. And remember, the retirement age is 60. So that means as technology comes up, as medical innovations come up, people are living older or are starting to live older. People are learning how to have healthy diets and all these things to have, a longer life. Now, that aging comes with challenges. Ordinarily, your body wears out and everything else stops growing apart from your ears. Now, and that's why you find old men and old women have big ears. Now, there is stigma, yes, there is stigma around age. And many people perceive the elderly as people who do not have choices. They cannot make their choices. People who do not understand. People who are ignorant, and yet they know exactly what is happening. We note that and we have written about this, we note that now childcare has been diverted to the elderly, where people go to urban places or they give birth to children, and they're very quick at sending them to their parents to take care of them. And yet, these mothers and these fathers and grandparents are tired. They need more of sleep and a little exercise. So that means they have to work the soil, they have to go to the gardens to feed the children of their children who are energetic. We also know that there's a lot of manipulation, stealing of land, and they have nothing to say. We note that many of them are facing health challenges. They go to hospital because the joints are hurting, the bones are hurting, and what the doctors or nurses tell them, Jaja, you're not sick, but you're just old. Now, the medication for the elderly is very expensive to support them, and also the support, sometimes they need sticks, they need to get, these support, mobility support equipment, and all that, hearing gadgets, which are really, really expensive. So the healthcare for the elderly is also a challenge. We also note that when they are, for example, health in hospitals, or you come up with health strategies, majority of those do not address the old. So when there's an insurance, it is limited up to the age of 50. And yet you need that insurance at 60 and above. You need it the most at that age. And we know that majority of Uganda's health insurance does not cover the elderly. We have also noted that when it comes to accessibility of buildings or even participating in political spaces, the elderly are ignored, they are disregarded, and they are not considered. When it comes to persons with disabilities, and I'm going to look at it as a whole because we do not have time, there are people who have disabilities and there are people in situation of vulnerability. Those two are different. You may be a person you do not have a disability, but then you are a refugee, then that means you become a person in a situation of vulnerability. You may be a person and you have no issue, but then you are incarcerated, you're in prison. You are in a situation of vulnerability. So we address these issues differently. Now, for persons with disabilities, and I'm going to talk about intellectual, mental, and all that, and try to lump it up all together. They face a number of challenges. Many times, the strategies we have come up with do not take into consideration the differences in vulnerability. Now, we have laws, the PWD Act, and we're happy about that. We have ratified instruments that are relevant. However, the implementation of these laws is still lacking. Some persons with vulnerability, particularly those with mental disability, and those with severe physical disability, need a lot of support. However, that support, many times the parents, the guardians get tired. And so they're at the mercy of one person. And yet the state does not come in to help. Now, in developed countries, if you have a child with a disability, immediately you give birth, the state comes in. Unfortunately, we do not have that. And I'll go back to in the older persons briefly, because I forgot to mention something. There is the social assistance grant that government came up with, and we are very happy about that. Unfortunately, it is limited to the age of 60. And it's not yet covering the whole country. So we request that maybe, it is up to the age of 80. And so there are people of 70 who, especially in the rural areas, who are really, really struggling, and they need that 20,000 to be supported. So as a commission, we have said, can you reduce the age to the age, or increase the age to 60, so that we have another bigger part of people to benefit. Otherwise, that money, it may seem little, but it makes a big difference in the lives of the older persons. The other issue when it comes to persons with disabilities, and I will not repeat what my previous colleague stated, is the issue of land and the issue of making choices. Majority of them, if you are born and you have land, or your parents gave you land, you are not allowed to make decisions. They think you do not know. When it comes to education, we as a commission have been calling for inclusive education, because we note that the children have to come from childhood when they know that there are people who are different from us. Now, we have been having, or we have schools that are for persons with disabilities. Now, when we take our children in these schools, they have specialized teachers. That is good. However, the child who has never seen a person with disability will never appreciate the fact that there are people who are different, who have whether albinism or who have a hearing impairment, and how I can deal with them. But when we talk about inclusive education, we mean that bring all the children together, have specialized teachers, so that these young learners get to know that they are different people, and as they grow, they are more there's more acceptance towards persons with disabilities. The other is about health, and the fact that they continue to face challenges in accessing buildings. We still have buildings that don't have ramps. We have schools that don't take care of issues such as ramps or access. Now, even university, Makerere University, they lack facilities to help children or students with hearing impairment, the hearing aid, or even going to the library. They need big magnifying glasses, those with visual, who have partial, who have partial blindness. They need a big magnifying glasses to be able to read a book. All these issues are not there. So I'll stop there,
Okay.
and then let my colleagues speak.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Ruth. And you brought to light something that quite interesting. I hadn't ever thought of, where you talk about why are we putting these kids separate? Because at the end of the day, they are going to live in the same society. Isn't this a challenge? Maybe also that will comment later. But I want to stretch just next to you, to Madam Ajiambo, the Assistant Commissioner, Disability and the Elderly. I have learned consistently that disability is not inability. And that's my point of engagement with you. How does the ministry, in its capacity as the mother of all these other umbrellas, these other institutions that try to assist, implement this? How is it trying to implement this thing called disability, not being inability? Because as Madam Ruthia did bring out the contrast between vulnerability and disability. How has the ministry, in its own different programs and forums, addressed the need to apprise this aspect of being unable for the people who are actually disabled?
Yes, thank you very much. Moderator, allow me first to educate and inform the country,
please,
that the Persons with Disabilities Act under Schedule 3 stipulates the categories of disability. And we do have physical disability. That one can encompass those who do not have limbs caused by cerebral palsy. We also have hearing disability, where people are unable to hear and listen. We have visual disability, those who are unable to see. We have another form of disability called deaf-blind. You're both deaf and blind. Then we also have mental disability. That covers all the cognitive disabilities, the psychiatric disabilities, Down syndrome, autism. We also have little people. I think you've seen some people who are quite small, yet they are mature persons. But we also have albinism, as this previous speaker talked about. It was a new addition. But then, because the disability is diverse, the last category is multiple. You can have any of these combined. So all these forms of disabilities are categorized under the Persons with Disabilities Act. So some other forms that come about are medical conditions. For instance, talk about sickle cell, it's a medical condition. They are not forms of disability. Because to define a person with a disability, you must have substantial limitation. Substantial functional limitation. For instance, if we are put on a race to begin running, a person with one limb won't be able to run.
Paying your bills the old way.
Let's go. Just need to buy some power.
Paying your bills with the My Airtel app.
Bro, there's a line.
You have the power in your pocket. The power to instantly pay your bills hassle-free. Unlock that power with the My Airtel app. Visit the App Store or Google Play now.
Oh, you're back.
Ayya, that due tonight.
Psst. Use Quillbot Premium.
Premium?
Quill up to 3 pages, 10,000 characters at once, with a faster processing speed to get more done in less time.
Where has this been all my life? Thank you, Quillbot!
The rest of the day is yours. Save your time. Get started with Quillbot today.
that provides for all the provision of the rights and programs and interventions that should improve the lives of persons with disabilities. We have the Persons with Disabilities Act, which is the newest, which has been aligned to the UNCRPD, UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this act, it's self-regulating. We're unable to make regulations because the act is clear enough and is self-regulating. So we've been encouraging stakeholders to utilize the provisions within the act to demand for their rights. But because we believe disability is not inability, as a ministry and as government, we've tried to ensure that there is inclusion in all aspects. Of course, there are challenges, but we are trying to ensure that there is inclusion. I'll go, allow me try to tackle some of the issues that my colleague talked about, because when they were doing inspections, the things that came about that maybe we need to bring to light. She talked about implementation of the laws. As I've said, we do have the Constitution. We do have the Act, which is self-regulating. But the challenge is people maybe may not know what are these provisions. And as government, we have begun the process of trying to translate this law into other local languages, making it much more accessible. We even have a braille copy of the Persons with Disabilities Act, so people who have visual impairment can be able to read and access the contents of the Act. But we still acknowledge there are still challenges that we need to do to ensure that it's popular and people are able to understand. And understanding it in more accessible formats. By the way, we have also signed the whole Persons with Disabilities Act in sign language, so those who cannot be able to hear, those with hearing impairments, are able to read through all the signages of the Act. So we are going step by step to ensure that the Act is more accessible and people are able to understand it better. But also, we are having programs in place that are supporting persons with disabilities, especially the vulnerable groups. We understand that employment for persons with disabilities is a big, big challenge. Because, first of all, the negative attitudes that employers have toward disabilities and the general attitude toward disability. So, as government, we look at having, in addition to the formal employment, if we can support people to have self-employment, is one of the key areas that will help them improve their livelihoods. And we've put in place special programs, in addition to other programs, special programs that give support to persons with disabilities. One of our flagship programs is the National Special Grant for Persons with Disabilities. This is a program that provides grants to organize groups of persons with disabilities to start income-generating activities. And this program doesn't only target those that can work. We even target children through their parents groups. We target caregivers, those who have people with disabilities, those with severe disabilities. We target all people who are in organized groups. And this program we give, under this program we give grants not to be refunded, grants of groups between 5 to 15. And we're able to provide them with 5 million shillings to start income-generating activities. As of now, we have, since the financial year 2020, we have disbursed close to 13 billion to persons with disabilities to implement income-generating activities. And we are receiving a very amazing results because they're able to engage in income-generating activities and at least have an increase in income in their households. Because the cost of living with the person with disabilities, the medication, the education, as my colleague has talked, is quite high. So those are some of the programs we are providing. But also, as government, we do have skilling programs which are specific, especially in our centers. We train youth with disabilities in vocational skills to be able to start their own business ventures. Right now, we have 5 skilling centers that are active, and they are supporting persons with disabilities. If I am to go to health, especially devices, we still have a challenge with devices, and we acknowledge we are working together with the Ministry of Health to ensure that at least we have enough devices. If possible, even begin fabricating those devices within the country, because importing those devices is quite expensive and many of our people with disabilities cannot afford. So that is one of the challenge we are having, because most of the devices we are getting at donations. But we are working with our regional orthopedic workshops to empower them to be able to fabricate all these devices, and so they are freely accessible to persons with disabilities. You will allow me go to older persons. I will not go into the definition of older persons, so that any person who is aged 60 years and above is an older person.
But just about the same thing, is that a fair cap to define older, 60 years? It's just an opinion we can share. Because as she mentioned, that she feels that some people are being left out.
As in the age of 60 years and above, to be defined as an older person.
Yes.
It's an internationally agreed age by the UN that once someone clocks 60, and I think they based on most people retired 60, most governments are having their workers retiring at 60. So they feel when you reach 60 years, you become an older person.
Mm-hmm.
But for us in the aging world, when you're 60, you're a young older person.
Oh.
Yes, we are those who have just.
So we have young
older persons, then mid older person, then the older persons.
Older
So because you're going to find somebody who is 60 years, very strong and energetic, they're strong enough to really do many things, even better than younger people.
Surely.
So we do categorize them.
Okay.
So when you clock 60, you're still a baby in the family of aging.
People,
in the family of older persons. So 60 years is what we've agreed as government to be our cap for older persons. And issue of medication, as she highlighted, it is true. As you age, many medical conditions set in. And treating an older person, the cost of treating an older person is quite higher than that of treating a teenager. Therefore, issues of medication coupled with transportation to go to the health center also comes in. We are aware of all these issues, and that is why most of the medications for older persons were put on the essential drug list. Unfortunately, nowadays, everybody is having hypertension, everybody is having diabetes. So as our older persons are yet to go and receive the medicines, the young ones who are fast have finished the medicines. So that is on, but maybe they may not be adequate, but they've already been put on the essential drug list. But because of our conditions right now, the health conditions, most of us are having the diseases which were presumed to be for older persons. They're now with everybody. And because we understand all the challenges, my colleague talked about issues of older persons taking care of children, especially those orphans. Most of those who are coming to do like housemaid work, they leave their children with their grandparents. All that is a burden, and they have to offer education, they have to offer medication, they have to feed. We are cognizant of all those issues, and that is why we put in place the social assistance grants for empowerment, the SAGE program. And this 25,000 is meant at least to provide basics to that household. But amazingly, you'll find many older persons have even built houses out of the savings of those funds that we give them. The funds have been able to help them access medication because they cannot move long distances to the health centers. The funds have been able to even help them employ people in the gardens to till, since their energy levels are quite low. There are many amazing things.
How often do they get this money?
Every month we provide 25,000 shillings.
Every month.
Every month.
What's through which systems? How do they access this money?
Right now, government is providing. We have a pay provider. That is Centenary Bank, that goes to every parish and provides these funds. So right now, because the cost of going to pick 25,000 monthly is high, we do it every 3 months, so that they get a lump sum of 75,000.
Wow.
Yes, but this program, when we rolled it out, initially we had donors who were having the program from 65 years and above in 16 districts. But when we rolled it out, because of the inadequate resources, we were able to roll out the entire country from 80 years and above. So older persons aged 80 years and above are all getting these funds.
Just around the same thing, Madam Emily, I would also want you to make a comment about registration of older persons through NIRA before I get to
thank you.
A colleague from Nudupu.
Yes, thank you. Now, I was going to that. Okay. We use NIRA data to enroll all beneficiaries onto the program. And this data was collected in 2014 when the national registration was taking place. Yes. So that data that we use, NIRA is able to give us all older persons who turn 80 every year. And we use that data for targeting all beneficiaries. Now the challenge comes that in 2014, many people were not so much interested in registering. They did not understand maybe why they needed to be registered. But we continuously do residual registration with NIRA to ensure that we have older persons enrolled onto the program. But also during that time, NIRA was using thumbprints and the facial features to register a person. You realize that as people age, and especially our older persons in the villages, due to the manual work that they are doing, their thumbprints are worn out. And therefore the biometrics is unable to read the thumbprint. So this was one of the challenges that we are trying to work out with NIRA. And in this new wave of registration, which is ongoing up to July, NIRA has brought in a new system where they can also get the iris. In case the thumbprint is unable to be detected, they will use the iris to register that person. So maybe at this time, I would like to call upon our older persons to go and register. Or even their caretakers to take them and have them registered. Because it will be extremely impossible for them to receive the services without the NIN. Why are we using the NIN? There are many programs that are giving out support to older persons and even other vulnerable people. We want to avoid the double dipping. You're getting from this program, amidst limited resources. So we want to ensure that we have the identity of the person who is getting that service. It is the only way. It's the unique identifier that can identify the beneficiary.
Maybe just as a recommendation, can we also have, because there's been a lot of mayhem around this registration of older persons, can we have the institutions with the human resource get to some of these people? Given the nature of elderly people, some of them are immobility, some of them are not like in the villages, some are long distances. Maybe as we go forward, that we can look into as a recommendation.
Yes, actually our program has an aspect of home enrollment for the frail. Because there are those who cannot even move towards the registration centers. Yes. So we do have that program for home enrollment of frail older persons. But still, as you're saying, we're in partnership. Even private stakeholders, when they hear that we are registering, they should be able to bring, to assist the family members. They should be able to assist and bring older persons to the registration centers.
Point.
Yes.
Okay, I'll cross over to my brother there, Odwa Dennis, from Nudipu. And it's important for us to give our viewers a feel of what is going on as we get into as we still go with the discussion, having this dialogue on rights of vulnerable persons. Where does Nudipu come in, and what is Nudipu? Just paint a picture for us. What is this big word called Nudipu? Who are the people in Nudipu? Who qualifies and who doesn't qualify to be a member?
Thank you very much, moderator, and our viewers. Nudipu is a national umbrella organization for persons with disability, with the mandate of advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities in Uganda. Nudipu came into existence in the year 1987, so Nudipu has been there for a while. And and we are standing on some key areas that we want to see the lives of persons with disabilities change. And basically, we are looking at advocating national advocacy for the rights of persons with disabilities. And we are also looking at how do we build the capacity of our membership of NUDIPO, as well as economically empowering persons with disabilities through our programs, and also working closely with the government, as Emily has said, to ensure that persons with disabilities benefit from the government programs that has been designed to lift them from poverty and also improve their socio-economic well-being. And you have asked about the membership. Our membership are drawn from the National Disabled Persons Organizations. So there are organizations like the one for albinism is there, the one for physical disability, they're also there, the one for mental health is also there, they have their organizations. So all these organizations, they subscribe to NUDIPO's umbrella organization for persons with disabilities in Uganda. And also we have our membership drawn from the district unions of persons with disabilities in Uganda. Okay. And now we are covering over 140 districts in Uganda. We have not yet covered everywhere, as they have been talking about the SAGE, the elderly persons assistive grants, because extending our membership to the different districts in the country goes hand in hand with also costs related to building the capacity of the newly formed district union and ensuring that they are able to pick and handle their issues at the district, because they play the role NUDIPO plays at the national, they play the same role at the district level to advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities in the districts. So these are our membership, the membership of NUDIPO.
Okay.
Which I can.
Now, as we do get back to the focal point, as we try to address the purpose of the dialogue, looking onto the rights of people with vulnerable or who are in a vulnerable situation, clearly most people who are disabled qualify to be assisted in this dialogue. If you may highlight some of the threats, the human rights threats that are exposed to people with disabilities, for us to have a good discussion on how we can find assistance.
Yeah, that is very, very important in this dialogue to understand what are the key human rights challenges that persons with disabilities are facing. First of all, I would like to recognize the fact that the government of the Republic of Uganda has done a lot, and as the disability fraternity, we really recognize the efforts by government of Uganda to ensure that persons with disabilities, their lives are really elevated through different government programs which are really running on. And we also want to appreciate the role played by Uganda Human Rights Commission, generally on the aspect of rights. We have been engaging a lot with them on the rights of persons with disabilities, dialogue meetings, and also encouraging us to look at how do we improve on the rights of persons with disabilities. And as well as Ministry of Gender, Emily, representing Ministry of Gender here, we have done a lot of interactions between these MDAs, and we have all the issues that we have been interacting about is how do we improve on the status of persons with disabilities in this country. And I would like to say, even if we have challenges that we are facing as far as the rights of persons with disabilities are concerned, there has also been some progress that has been made. For instance, we have the laws, the available legal framework really support persons with disabilities. Like we have the international instrument like UNCRPD, which has been incorporated in our Persons with Disabilities Act 2020, which speaks about the rights of persons with disabilities in different aspects. And leaving that aside, we have to really see even as we talk about these rights, how far have we achieved in ensuring protection of the rights of persons with disabilities vis-a-vis the existing legal instruments at the national level and also applying the international principles? I would like to say we still have challenges, which is not very far from what my colleagues have been talking about. Even in the first phase, there are a lot of challenges that came out. I would just want to begin by saying that there are challenges that relates to employment of persons with disabilities, which is a very big one. And we believe that this would be improved upon by even coming on board of this Persons with Disabilities Act, because under the Act there is a provision that really mandates that some percentage of persons with disabilities should be employed in public service, and of which we still believe that this should really be actionable. And we want to see, like on a yearly basis, government do recruitment. How many slots are given to persons with disabilities? We have these recruitments being done at the national level and also the District Service Commission. We should be getting statistics from the government in terms of how many persons with disabilities have been recruited in a year. And I think this is the beauty of the Persons with Disabilities Act, trying to address the issues of employment of persons with disabilities, which is still really high. The challenge is still high because of the challenges that are associated with the employment of persons with disabilities. Some institutions would think like employing a person who is visually impaired will bring additional cost to them, because you need to maybe like make sure that the person is accessing Braille, something like that, and you make sure that the communications that are really going on should actually be Braille, and some people take it as cost. Another example could be employing a person with the hearing impairment, and this would actually bring some cost around, because the person cannot work well without the sign language interpreter. And therefore, if you employ such a person, you must be able to provide for the sign language interpreter for the person to work. So we are still doing a lot of advocacy that people should understand that really these are the needs for persons with disabilities. It is the right of persons with disabilities to be employed and also to gain a living out of the work that they can do, both in the public sector and the private sector. And therefore, it is still something that we are working upon, and we are still calling upon the government to expedite this, and we should be able to get these statistics like every year so that we get to know really how these provisions within Persons with Disabilities Act is benefiting persons with disabilities. That is one of the challenge that I'd wanted maybe to bring on board. And there is also a big challenge in the area of education. You know, by statistic, persons with disabilities compared to others without disabilities, when you look at their level of qualifications, education, you still find there's a big challenge in that area of education. And we are very happy that the government gives some scholarship, some slot for like 64 persons with disabilities joining the higher institutions of learning. That is really good. But this came sometimes back even when we had very few universities. But now we're having many government universities. And also with the massive sensitization, affirmative action, many of persons with disabilities join schools right from primary. And they continue to progress. And by the time they sit for their A-level, senior 6, they are supposed to join institutions. Not all of them will go for government admission. But this affirmative action of ensuring that the number of persons with disabilities who are qualifying at some level is really progressively increasing. has to be scaled up by maybe increasing the slot to some bigger number. Even when we put like 200 or even 150 per admission, at least it will improve on number of persons with disabilities who are qualifying at the higher level of learning, like higher institutions, universities, and all this. Now, still on aspect of education, my colleague talked about the issue of inclusive education. And we want to see, and also the government is coming out with this as a measure of reducing discrimination to ensure that learners with disabilities will be in the same class with those without disabilities. But this does not mean that they can pick maybe the learning, the speed, the what at the same time. There should be a balance here. And I think the Ministry of Education should be able to come out with measures of ensuring that even if we are having inclusive education and having all these learners in the same class, how are we going to support these learners with disabilities so that they learn at the same pace with those ones without disability?
Okay.
The program itself is so good, but then how do we make it work out for those learners
in the same way?
In the same way. Like in the earlier dialogue, my colleague Olive talked about persons with albinism.
Yes.
They may not be seeing from far.
Bring them
but
in
then
front.
When you understand the challenges that they go through, you bring them in front and they will be able to pick. Another challenge now would be a learner with the hearing impairment who needs a sign language interpreter. And we are having a teacher who may not be well versed with the sign language interpretation. How is this teacher going to balance the interests of this child with the hearing impairment with also other learners without what? Hearing impairments. All these aspects have to be discussed and harmonized for equality, because education is a right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Education is a right, and they have the right to learn at equal level,
just like
with
the
those
others.
ones without disabilities.
Okay.
So I really look at education. We are appreciative of some of the programs that have already been initiated, but we are not saying it is enough. We are saying, can we dig
There's
deeper
more that needs to be done
and really handle some of the smaller issues that are there, so that really there is equality in terms of education. So that is another challenge that I wanted to talk about. Someone raised also here about the issue of the health of persons with disabilities. You know, disability comes also with the other health-related challenges that sometimes may be chronic. And you need to treat like there are people who need to visit maybe health centers regularly on the basis of their disability. And this is very expensive for a person with disability. And each time you go to the hospital, maybe you need to carry some good money alongside. So as a disability fraternity, we are trying to say, like, can't there be some program that can help these chronic health needs of persons with disabilities, so that they can visit hospitals and they can access some of these services without spending a lot of money. I think this can be of a very good help to persons with disabilities who are battling with challenges related to health that comes from the disability.
Okay.
And
okay, as you conclude about that point.
I don't know. I have many issues, but it is okay. Maybe you'll control me where you want me to stop.
I just want to bring in Ms. Ruth Sechindi here. Something that you did mention related to human rights. And I would want to bring her in that angle, that what are some of those intermediating factors or what is being done by the Commission to reduce some of these threats that are exposed to persons that are vulnerable? And as you did say, and also your colleague earlier did expanded this discussion of vulnerability. That, for example, you talked about people in prison, you talked about children, the elderly. What are the intermediaries that you are doing as a Commission to reduce on the threats, human rights threats, that are exposed to these people? many of them, he said, this became a reality from what Mr. Odo was saying. Remember in COVID times, the disabled people were so vulnerable to the point that everything, for example, imagine curfew hours for some people who didn't see, who are not hearing. So what are we doing as a commission?
And some of them became casualties.
Yes.
One of the persons with the hearing impairment was shot by the security personnel, and they had to amputate again.
Yeah.
So that is now multiple disability cause.
Yes.
Just because he was stopped, said, and who are you? He stopped, he wasn't hearing, and they fired at him.
It is sad.
So those are the challenges.
So as we try to give life to this dialogue, we also want to look into what the Commission is doing or planning to do as the watchdog or as the big brother, as normally we say, to intermediate for some of the exposures that come with being vulnerable at that.
Okay, thank you. I think the first thing aspect, I think my colleague mentioned it, is sensitization and human rights awareness. And that's why we're here today. When people are aware and know, they do things differently. And then, so when we go to the communities, we talk about issues of discrimination, we talk about issues of stigma for persons with disabilities, we talk about acceptance, we talk about tolerance, we talk about the need for support. For example, we highlight issues that women, disabled women, have multiple discrimination. First of all, she will be raped. The risks are higher. She'll be raped because she cannot attend to herself. The risks are higher. And then she's a woman. She should be expected to cook. So when she's trying to cook, the fire. So the levels of discrimination of particular persons, vulnerable persons within vulnerability, becomes high. So the Commission sensitizes, creates awareness, and here we go to communities and talk to them. We sensitize them. We also receive complaints, including that one where during curfew, a gentleman was walking and the police said, "Stop, stop, stop." They did not know that he had a hearing disability. So they shot at him because they thought. So we investigate such matters, and it's so unfortunate that happened. And then other than receiving complaints and investigating, we also monitor the situation of human rights in the country, whereby we target where are these vulnerable persons. We go into communities, for example, the Batwa community. You know the stigma that relates around these ethnic minorities. Whereby someone, there's a belief or a perception that if you want to get cured of back pain or HIV/AIDS, go and get a Mutwa girl who's a virgin and you will get cured of HIV/AIDS. And that persons with albinism, for the longest time when I was growing, I didn't know why there were less adults of persons with albinism. There is a belief that they are demigods, so they just disappear, they do not die. And we later on found out that it's because these people were being killed through ritual killings because they need every part of their bodies. So when the public then starts saying, oh, these are gods, they just disappear, they do not die, no one had taken the trouble to understand and find out where do these people actually go. What happens to them? So it is through this sensitization that we are able to reach out to the community. And then even in education, we inform policy where we review bills, we review policies to ensure that these laws and policies are human rights sensitive, because we are trying to look at issues of stigma. What about access? If it is KCCA, are there roads for persons with disabilities? Yes. Is there parking space for persons with disabilities? What about ramps on every building where it is a requirement? It should be a requirement in each school. So then we also work with Ministry of Education. If we're talking about inclusive education, what will it entail? Can we ensure that every teacher, through their curriculum, they learn sign language?
Some idea of...
Not even an idea. They all learn sign language.
Wow.
Because we're pushing for inclusive education. How then can we ensure that these teachers don't only learn sign language, but also appreciate the issues of vulnerability, so that if they are training or teaching, they'll know how to deal with them? Because we do not expect every child to end up in Mbale, in the specialized school. And then also training parents. Now, one of the challenges that any parent gets is when you give birth to your child and it has a disability. The stigma starts. Immediately, usually the husband leaves their wives. And then they tell you, we do not give birth to such. Then culture comes in and religion comes in, and it is considered a curse. So then they attribute it to, you must have committed a sin. So the father sits back, the mother sits back and says, what did I do to get this curse? And then because of that, the commission found that there's mercy killings.
Oh, yeah.
Mercy killings is where the parents or guardians kill their own children just because they want to protect these children from the big, ugly world that is out there. They want to protect them from the stigma, but also protect themselves. Because when you give birth to a child who has physical disabilities, you have to stop everything. You have to stop work and just attend to this child for the rest of your life. So they try to eliminate this child at an early age. What about religion, where the priests and clergy come in and tell you that you have sinned, that you giving birth to this child, you have committed the ultimate sin. So you start punishing yourself because of the child that you gave birth to. So the stigma that the parents have, and no one tries to cancel them, the stigma that the child faces as they grow, the pain is with the parent, the guardian, and the child as well. So by us coming in to speak about these issues, to involve the relevant government ministries and highlight them, and also to make recommendations to what should be done, is one of those things we do. So we do it in line with our mandate of education and sensitization, receiving and investigating complaints on human rights violation, monitoring the situation of human rights, and reporting about them, so that when we report this and put it in annual reports, these reports are debated in Parliament. And many times when we appear before Parliament, the MPs are amazed at what is out there. Because then you understand that there's a lot of misinformation, underinformation, and yet these are the representatives of the people who should know this.
I'll come to Madam Emily there, and as we wrap up, time is not our best ally. From the ministry's perspective, generally, would want to get the final remark regarding particularly to being vulnerable. There are many incidents that make people vulnerable today. And I love the fact that our colleagues tried to widen the scope. How do we deal with the threats? For example, and I want to use examples like we have challenges today lately, like gender. Gender is also one of those things that make people vulnerable. If you have seen challenge, we had most recently we had a big litigation from Sebei, the female genital mutilation. You saw what happened, and I think also the Commission had a contribution in that case. You've had issues to do with boy child, guy child. How do we deal with the threats generally? You as the mother or the umbrella body, how do you reduce the threats that expose people to being vulnerable?
Okay. Yes, thank you. As ministry, we want how we deal with the threats is through ensuring that our communities and societies are resilient. They are resilient enough to be able to address the shocks. You know, when you're vulnerable, you're prone to shocks. Anything small will take you down. So what we do is to minimize the shocks. And how do we minimize the shocks? By making the population more resilient. More resilient through the programs that we are undertaking. More resilient through the advocacy we do. The sensitization that we do. Through the social protection program that we are having. So when we talk about still the SAGE, maybe I'll go back to the SAGE program.
Sure.
Older persons are vulnerable to shocks, economic shocks. How do we make them resilient? We make them resilient through provision of those cash transfers, which are regular, so that they're able to address the shocks as they come in. People with disabilities, they are vulnerable to the shocks of inadequate health, inadequate household incomes, and all those other social protection programs. We undertake them to make our communities more resilient, and they're able to address these shocks as they come in. But as you see, we've done a lot of sensitization, a lot of advocacy. The ministry has a lot of activities that it conducts. For instance, if you talked about violence against children, we have the 116 Sauti, where people are supposed to call in and report such cases of violence when they happen to children, and then we're able to follow up the case and work with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that we support them. So we do a wide range of activities that are supposed to help the community to be more resilient to vulnerabilities as they come in. But before I conclude, there is a question that came about my colleague when they were doing the monitoring. They saw issues of reduction of the age, eligibility age for those who are receiving the social assistance grants for empowerment. Our age right now is 60 years, and we have been unable to reduce the age because of the cost implication. So what government has done between the older persons between the ages of 60 to 79, because for now we can't reduce the age, we have introduced another supplementary program to SAGE to target only those older persons who are not receiving SAGE, and it's called the Special Enterprise Grant for Older Persons. Also, this program works like the one for persons with disabilities in groups and targets older persons who are within groups between 5 to 10 members, and they're also given resources to start income-generating activities. And this is supposed to help them understand how enterprises are run, to breed them so that they're even able to benefit from other programs like PDM, which are revolving, because ours is a grant, PDM, which is revolving, the yogas. By the time they go there to get the money which is revolving, at least they have some aspects of how they can manage the enterprises. Then when they reach 80 years, they will be enrolled onto SAGE. So that other group of older persons who were left out have now been covered by government. So all these interventions we're talking about are meant to help the population become more resilient and be able to be self-sufficient and reliant when they receive shocks that are caused due to their vulnerabilities.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Now I'll cross over to Mr. Odo there. And as we conclude, your parting shots in relation to what needs to be done, focusing on human rights. What can be done? The Human Rights Commission is here, the ministry is here, and we all seek to have an environment where we can live freely, happily, and generally also appreciating who we are without any sort of a fear that, as you know, you see, we have highlighted stigma as one of the biggest challenges for people who are vulnerable and disabled. Your parting shots relating to what needs to be done by government, private institutions, and later on probably individual.
Yeah, thank you very much. I do think we are not very bad. We are on the track.
That's good.
In terms of human rights, because we have the instruments, we have the constitution, we have other laws that really specifies on the rights of different categories of people. And I think what we should be doing is to have a multi-dimensional approach in a perspective of engagement with the relevant stakeholders to absorb and really make it a point. Use, for example, human rights-based approach in their programming for their activities, and make sure that in everything that they plan, it has an inclusivity aspect that caters for the rights of persons with disabilities. You ask yourself, where are persons with disabilities in this? How do we support them in this area? I think if we have constructive engagement and recognizing the laws that we have, and also implementing the laws that we have and making them functional within our communities, that really we have these categories of vulnerable people, we can really see that there will be changes in the way that they perceive enjoyment of some of these rights that we are talking about. So we don't need to get tired to engage and also to be inclusive in our programming time and again. And in that, we can really bring some difference in the lives of vulnerable people. And also, what I see is that it is very, very true that we have these laws in place and we have all these programs, but we need to scale down the awareness at the lowest local government. You see, people can really understand it as a very big thing from up, but down there are persons with disabilities understanding this, including even educating them on their rights.
Okay.
For example, we have Persons with Disabilities Act 2020. This is a very good law, but how do we make even that person with disability at that village level to understand about their rights? And this is where we are saying government has done well. There is the law we have in place, but I think there's still some gap of how do we create awareness about this law at the grassroots. And as civil society, we come out to do this, but sometimes we are limited by the funding. You cannot go to every village and talk about this. This is the role of the government. And we expect that even as we pass on these laws, we should also be able to see how shall we make these laws to be felt at the community level. Someone talked about, I think my sister Ruth talked about the issue of making some of these laws to be translated in the local languages, different local languages. Because someone has not gone to school, may not actually read and understand English. But when you really summarize some of these laws into the local languages, they can read and understand about their rights. And in case of anything happening that violate their rights, they can stand and say, the law says this is wrong. And that is the kind of empowerment that we want to see with persons with disabilities. Okay. How do we empower them to make them really realize that? And you see, there is also aspect of them to, the rights of persons with disabilities to development, talk of employment, benefiting from government programs and all this. We have a scenario of persons with disabilities not having maybe the national ID. And some of the government programs, as they come, they ask, what is your name? And this has been a very big issue. Someone is being left out from government program merely because you don't have the national ID. And sometimes the process of really acquiring this national ID could have not been inclusive enough. Because where was the center for registration, first of all? Did you consider that there's a person on a wheelchair who cannot even move a very long distance to go and register?
Okay.
Or did you consider that there are certain disabilities that there are other people without even this, the fingerprints? Did you consider them by that time at the time of registration? And so there are very many questions really to answer.
Okay.
And I'm happy that recently we had an engagement also with NERA, and we really we pushed to them some of these issues, and they promise that they are going to address it in the exercise that is forthcoming.
Okay.
And we believe that if all of us can collectively look at the issues that affects the rights of the vulnerable people, including persons with disabilities, the elderly people, the children, the women, all these categories, we can make our society to be a better place where everyone can enjoy really living, and by that we shall be fulfilling what makes us happy.
Thank you so much, Ndugu Odua Dennis. But I just want to give 30 seconds to Madam Emily Sherif.
I would like to allay the fears of my brother that this forthcoming registration is going to be as inclusive as possible, because all these things for this period of time we have been seeing them.
Okay.
Because there are those who do not have limbs, but they have to be registered. So we are working closely with NERA to ensure that this time we should have almost every person registered. But then also on the previous point, he talked about sensitization. You know, government knew wouldn't be everywhere. So what government has done is to put in place structures. Structures for older persons, structures for persons with disability. We do have councillors across the country.
Yes.
We do have all these. And by the way, for older persons, we should be among the few African countries with members of parliament representing older persons. So you can see the issues of participation of older persons with activities has really has taken center stage for government. So what we need to do now, we equip these leaders at the different levels with the necessary tools they need, necessary policies they need, necessary legal and policy frameworks that they need, so they're able to stand up for the rights of other older persons. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you too. Thank you so much, Ndugu Odwa, Dennis there, Jambo, Emily, and also Miss Ruth Sechinde. Now, thank you so much, our viewers, but also majorly want to throw great thanks to at least the Human Rights Commission of Uganda that did spearhead this dialogue on rights of vulnerable persons. It's quite engaging, but for us not to forget, UBC also to thank you for being part of this. But we want to retire by reminding everyone out there that inclusion of people who are vulnerable is only for our own good, because we may not guarantee when we also become vulnerable. We talked about age, we talked about various aspects that will render us vulnerable in various ways. We pray that we take this upon ourselves to be a part of the solution rather not the problem. Thank you so much from me, and good morning, and UBC. Nkunda Felix, and thank you so much for watching. Next programming will be taking at all. Good morning.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.